and all to this very important webinar. May Allah Ta'ala accept everybody's coming on, and may this webinar be beneficial to all, inshallah. As we are all aware that this webinar was planned quite some time back, and the real aim and objective of this webinar is that how can we take out the guesswork from when we're filling in our assessment forms. So up to now, we were filling in our assessment forms, but many of us, we were still guessing when we were filling in the assessment forms. So to take out that guesswork and to get a more accurate account and number on in our assessments, this is why we are having this assessment webinar, inshallah. Allah Ta'ala accept from everybody that they have come on tonight, and may it be beneficial for everybody, inshallah. As we are all aware that for a number of years we were using the assessment forms, and and after much deliberations, we thought to ourselves that let us improvise, and with the contribution of many other ulama and muallimas from our madaris and our schools, um, we got all the contributions uh, uh, to this assessment form, and we decided that now we are going to just do slight changes to the assessment form. So for this, we are having this webinar, and inshallah, our colleague Mudi Abdullah Hajat will then outline to us exactly how these assessment form will be filled in, inshallah. So without further ado, inshallah, I would first of all request our colleague Maulana Muhammad Minti to start off this session and this webinar with the recitation from the Quran Kareem, and thereafter immediately, inshallah, Muli Abdullah Hajat will take over, inshallah. Jazakumullah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah, Maulana. Muli Abdullah Hajat can take over now, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ورتل القرآن ترتيلا صدق الله العظيم. Honorable ulama, muallimin, muallimat, once again I would like to take this opportunity to thank the so far 220 odd people that are online. Allah Ta'ala reward you for taking out your time on this Thursday night to be part and parcel of this very beneficial, hopefully beneficial webinar, where we will discuss, as we did last year, the assessment sheets of the Jam'iyyatul Ulama Ta'alimi Board, the objectives of that assessment sheets and how those assessment sheets ought to be used. But before we go to the actual discussion as far as the assessment sheet is concerned, I think I would firstly like to say that as asatiza and teachers who are teaching Quran, who are teaching surahs and du'as in primary ta'aleem, in the makatib, we need to understand very, very important that while we do assessment of learners, we cannot assess a learner in a manner in which we did not teach that learner. It is unfair to the child, it is unfair to the learner. Hence, we are asking and we are saying that these assessment sheets that has been developed by our predecessors, that has been developed by the seniors that have passed through the Ta'alimi board, and those that are still currently present with us, it is very important that we take cognizance of the objective behind this particular assessment sheet. If we have to ask the question, and obviously time does not allow us to take answers from anybody, but please feel free in the chat if you want to type your answers. We will have a look at it and get an understanding of what your understanding is out there as to why we do assessments. If we have to ask the question, why do we do assessments? Are we doing an assessment in Quran, in surahs and in ad'iyah, in du'as, to test how much the child knows? Are we doing an assessment to give a mark to the child so that we fulfill a responsibility of filling in a report? Are we doing an assessment so that we can understand who is the best readers in the class, who is going to get the first position, who is going to get second position, and so forth? Or are we doing an assessment so that we can give the correct feedback to the learner? We can then utilize that assessment to teach every learner in a way where whatever mistakes were made during the assessment, those mistakes are rectified. So the question is, why do we do assessment? And this is a very, very important question for a muallim or a muallima who is teaching Quran, surahs or du'as, that why are we doing this particular assessment? Is it only to see whether the child knows his work, or are we there as teachers? Are we there as teachers? Many of those who has seen some of our workshops, you will know that if we look at the word teach, we are there to teach. And if we make the word teach into an acronym, then it would mean to educate all children honestly and harmoniously. That is why we want that assessments should not only be for purposes of a mark. The mark is a formality. The mark is a formality. Yes, it will be a requirement in our respective institutes. That mark is there. But more important than the mark, is for us to make such an effort through these assessments that every learner that goes through our institute leaves our institute reciting Quran correctly. And that is the objective, and that is the idea as to why we do these assessments. So having said that, this assessment sheet workshop, if we go to the next slide, and you will see, as far as the agenda of this assessment sheet workshop is concerned, there are, one is we will talk about the Quran assessment sheet for grade 3 to grade 5. Grade 3 to grade 5, see, normally what organizations say, you spoke and we listened. And this is exactly what happened. Many of our asatiza, many of our maulanas, our muallimin, our apas and muallimat have been speaking to the supervisors over the course of time that how long are we going to continue assessing a grade 3 learner and a grade 12 learner on the same criteria. Hence, we sat down as supervisors and had long deliberation on how are we going to take into consideration this concern, this idea that is coming from the ground, from people that are in the classroom. So alhamdulillah, we said that we will differentiate. We will have two sets of assessment sheets. Yes, there are going to be teething problems. Inshallah, they won't. But it's a new new concept that we are going to have two different assessment sheets, one for grade 3 to 5, and then one for grade 6 to 12, where we have made cosmetic changes. We have made cosmetic changes, and inshallah, towards the end, we will put those changes and we will show you the assessment sheet that has been, the changes that has been made on the respective assessment sheets. So then we will have the surah assessment sheet, which we will discuss inshallah, because there has been some changes that has been made on that as well as the ad'iyah assessment sheet that we have made some changes on there as well. So inshallah, we make dua that we will be able to provide you with such information that will make your testing of oral subjects in the classroom more constructive, more objective, and with more meaning to it, inshallah. So if we move to the next slide thereafter, in the assessment sheet, as we are well aware, there are 8 categories. I'm just breaking it down to 8 categories. There are more columns there, but there are basically 8 categories on the assessment sheet. The first category is that of ta'awuz and tasmiyah. Now, as we always say, that many asatiza, many a muallim or muallima tell us that why have you allocated 5 marks for ta'awuz and tasmiyah, whereas children are born reading ta'awuz and tasmiyah. They come to the maktab, they come to the Muslim school, they already know how to read ta'awuz and tasmiyah. So why are you allocating 5 marks? And many ulama or appas, they tell us that is 5 marks for free, basela, free 5 marks. Whereas that is not the case. From our observation, experience, and many of you that are here online, from your observation and your experience also, you will note that there are still many errors that learners, even in higher grade, are making in ta'awud and tasmiyah. Hence, ta'awud and tasmiyah, I'm just going to say something. You see, one is teaching, right? That is our primary responsibility. But just keep this in mind. Together with that primary responsibility of teaching, we need to incorporate the aspect of tarbiyah. So I'm teaching Quran, I'm teaching ta'awudh and tasmiyah. One is the teaching of ta'awudh and tasmiyah. One is the teaching of recognition, open letters, closed letters, pronunciation, rules of tajweed. One is the teaching. That is the academic aspect of it. But how can I use this opportunity? How can I use this opportunity that through teaching these Quranic concepts, I make the tarbiyah of the learner as well? So we need to incorporate the aspect of tarbiyah as well. So one is we teach it. But together with that, let us tell them why we read ta'awudh, why we read tasmiyah, what is ta'awudh and what is tasmiyah. If we do not tell them that, then we cannot motivate them to read it correctly. We will scream and shout till the cows come home, and still they will not be rectifying themselves. Use that hikmah of targheeb, use that hikmah of encouragement, of motivation. This is ta'awudh. Why are we reading ta'awudh? It is the command of Allah in the Quran. إِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ. Allah is saying this in the Quran. When you read Quran, then recite ta'awudh. Seek refuge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from shaitan the accursed. Explain to them very briefly, not to show them we are Bahrul Ulum, not to show them how much knowledge we have, and we can talk volumes on ta'awudh and tasmiyah. Just for one few seconds, 30 seconds, 35 seconds, 40 seconds, explain to them from time to time what is the meaning of ta'awudh, what is the meaning of tasmiyah, and see the difference it will make. Now you have incorporated this aspect of tarbiyah. You have incorporated this aspect of tarbiyah. You told them what is ta'awudh, what is tasmiyah. What is the benefit of reciting ta'awudh? What is the benefit of reciting tasmiyah? Now to teach it to them becomes more easy, because you have grasped, you have got their attention, you have grabbed their attention, you got their attention now. They are interested in something. Now teach it to them to read correctly. Inshallah, with your effort, your dua, your sadaqah, it will start happening. That these mistakes, if we put up the slide and the ta'awudh and tasmiyah, if we can put up the ta'awudh and tasmiyah, and you will see that the highlighted errors, these are general observations that the Ta'limi board has made over the years, that these are generally the mistakes that learners make in ta'awudh and tasmiyah. Everything else besides these is straightforward. It is straightforward. They don't really make some mistakes. Yes, we understand the dynamics in our country. We have learners from other countries as well, and sometimes their lahja, their pronunciation, their tongues are different. So there may be other mistakes. But generally, these are the mistakes that are being made in ta'awudh and tasmiyah. Now, if you look at ta'awudh, what is on your screen, you will see that in ta'awudh, there are 5 highlighted mistakes, and in tasmiyah, there are 5 highlighted mistakes. We need to pay attention to these mistakes. We often say science tells us, and I'm not using science as a proof, I'm just using it as an example. Science tells us that a person should visit an optometrist once a year to have his eyes tested so he can see, or she can see, whether the eyes need the numbers in the glasses need to change, or whether they need glasses as spectacles or not. In the same way, they tell us that you must visit a dentist to have a cleanup once every 6 months. We say to Quran teachers, and I'm exaggerating, but just to show you the importance, we say to Quran teachers that very often you must go and have a visit to the audiologist. Now, I know we don't earn so much of money, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm exaggerating. But we need to listen. What I'm trying to say is we need to listen attentively. We need to listen attentively. Now, what is happening? What is happening? Our observation again. Children are reading ta'awudh and tasmiyah, but because we have that mentality that they learned it from home, they know it from home. So when they're reading ta'awudh and tasmiyah, we are not paying attention to how they're reading it. So how they are reading it, and we allow it to happen. We allow that to happen. Hence, it becomes habit. It becomes a habit. Now to change that habit becomes a difficulty. Hence, we are saying concentrate on these mistakes. That's why we have allocated 5 marks for ta'awudh and tasmiyah. Not as a punitive measure, but as a corrective measure. And I repeat that, not as a punitive measure, but as a corrective measure, that if a mistake is made in ta'awudh and tasmiyah, the important thing now, what I'm going to say now is very important, that these mistakes are highlighted. Alhamdulillah, we have given these cards out over the years with these mistakes. And if anybody needs these cards, please contact your circuit supervisor or contact us at the office, and we will inshallah make these cards available to you. So you can even, I'm not marketing, right? I'm not marketing, I'm just giving you ideas. You can even purchase it from JUT Publishing. There's the A3 chart or the A2 chart that you can put in your classrooms so that the learners also can see where they are going to be assessed as far as ta'awudh and tasmiyah is concerned. Nevertheless, so when a child is reading ta'awudh and tasmiyah, these are the errors. The ayn, that is the pronunciation of the letter ayn. The dal, the pronunciation of the dal. Many a time it's a'uzu, a'uzu. The ayn is read as the hamza. The dal is read as the za, a'uzu. Then billahi. The word Allah, the ha, is a small ha, and for our understanding. But many of them are reading it from the throat. Billahi. They read billahi. So it is very important. We are very attentive. Now, when the mistake is made, it must be documented as it is made. It must be documented. In the column for ta'awudh and tasmiyah, we must write down, if a child read billahi instead of billahi, then we must write that small ha of billahi. So the ustad will know. The ustad will know. If it is an external assessment, the ustad of the class will know that this is a mistake this child made. This is a mistake this child made. Or if it is my internal assessment, and all of us are aware that we are asking for these assessments to be done on a monthly basis in your classroom, and your circuit supervisor will explain to you how that could be done and can be done. So if it is an external, it gives you an idea. Give the teacher, the class teacher, an idea that here is the mistake that the learner made. So as the mistake was made, it is documented. Ain, Zal, the Ha in Billahi, the Ta in Minash Shaita, and the Ra Mushaddad. The Ra Mushaddad. The Ra with the Tashdid. In Ta'awudh also, and in Tasmiyah as well. As you can see, the mistakes highlighted there. Many a time, the Ra, the Tashdid on the Ra is not being recited. And if we listen attentively, you will find that many a time it is not A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That is how it is being recited. And then when an external mumtahin comes and he records it as such, then we get excited that how is it possible that the learners are losing marks in ta'awudh and tasmiyah. Hence, I think I've motivated sufficiently why we've added this aspect of ta'awudh and tasmiyah, why 5 marks, and the reason why. In the end, the objective is that we need to get it corrected. Learners need to understand that ta'awudh and tasmiyah must also be read correctly. Now, let us not worry too much about whether they must join the ta'awudh and the tasmiyah. Best in our makatib and Muslim schools where we are teaching primary ta'lim, we teach them to read ta'awudh and make waqf, to read tasmiyah and make waqf before continuing, just to encourage them that it be read correctly. Just to encourage. Later, as they grow, maybe when they come to 8, 9, 10, then we can allow them to join it. But that also we must teach them to do it correctly. So for all these highlighted errors that you see here, that are highlighted in red, half a mark is deducted. Half a mark is deducted. I should have said this in the beginning. What we do is negative marking. So when a child is tested, every child starts with 100. Every child. They start with 100. And this is the husn zan that we have. Inshallah, that the child will end up with 100 also. But now as we go along, as they make the mistake, we document the mistake. So in ta'awudh and tasmiyah, if I highlight the 2 mistakes, for example, I wrote the dal. So the ustad knows they read the dal incorrectly, that needs to be taught. I wrote the ra mushaddad, the ra with the tashdid. The ustad knows that they are not reading the ra with the tashdid, so that needs to be corrected. Now one is, you see, and forgive me for saying this, many a time you'll get a phone call, but I tested the learners, they're reading it correctly. Why should we even ask that question? Let's be a bit more constructive. That fine, the mumtain wrote it, let me do it, let me teach it. Inshallah, it will only make the child better. If they were doing it correctly, they will do it more correctly, inshallah. So we take that into consideration, and we know that this is how it needs to be taught. This is how I need to teach. That we pick up a trend on that assessment sheet, that 20 learners in a class, out of 20 learners in a class, 6, 7, 8 learners are not reading the Ra Mushaddad. It's a concern. It's a concern. So we put that concern into our lesson plan, in our preparation, that now when I'm going to go into the classroom to teach, I'm going to teach the ta'awudh and tasmiyah, and this is what I'm going to concentrate on in teaching the ta'awudh and tasmiyah. While everything else is going to be taught, but my concentration and emphasis is going to be on the trend of the mistakes that were made or highlighted by the mumtahin. So that is as far as ta'awudh and tasmiyah is concerned. So there are 10 errors that are highlighted here, half a mark per error, and that will give you 5 marks for the ta'awudh and tasmiyah. Okay, if we move to the next slide, which is recognition. Recognition previously was out of 30 marks. We had 15 marks for huruf, which we have maintained, half a mark per letter. We can't go less than that. Now, when we talk of recognition of huruf, it's not only to see whether they are able to read a harf in a single format. There are 3 formats. A harf, when it comes in the beginning of the word, when it comes in the middle of a word, when it comes at the end of the word. Is a learner able to identify and recognize every letter in its different positions, in its respective positions? So sometimes a learner will be able to recognize the letter ha when it comes at the end of the word, because he learned it like that in the takhti. When he learned his TRQ towards reading Quran or yesterday Quran, in the beginning, he learned the letter ha as it comes at the end of the word. But when he comes in the middle of the word, he is doubting, he is taking more than 2-3 seconds before he reads it correctly, or he is reading, or she is reading it incorrectly. So we need to highlight that ha as it comes in the middle of the word, or as it comes in the beginning of the word. And if it is must recognize when it comes at the end of the word, then like that also it must be highlighted in that column that is given. Half a mark per letter. Half a mark per letter. Now in this also there's ikhtilaf, right? Some ulama, some Qurra, and they say that there are 29 letters of the Arabic alphabet. And some say there are 30 letters of the Arabic alphabet. So we just made it half a mark. Whether you count 29 or 30, whatever the extra half a mark is, we give it to you, Basela. We generous sometimes. Gee. So every letter must be heard correctly. So if they are making that mistake, it's half a mark per letter. But the important thing again, and I will continue to emphasize this, to document the incorrect recitation as it was incorrectly recited. And to be fair, not to just write down a mistake for the sake of writing the mistake. If the child never made the mistake, then let us also be fair and not document the mistake and give the marks. But if the mistake was made, then be attentive. Be attentive. Listen to the mistake, document the mistake, so the teacher knows that here is a mistake. This is something I need to teach. This is something I need to teach. So the teacher will be able to see, okay, this is the letter ha, or the letter qaf, or the letter dad, or the letter sad, or whichever letter it may be, as it comes in the beginning of the letter, or as it comes in the middle, or at the end of the letter. So this is where the child had made the mistake, the learner had made the mistake. So I need to concentrate on teaching that and rectifying it before the next imtihan. Nay, not before the next imtihan, before the next month comes. It must be corrected. So for every letter, alif to ya, half a mark per incorrect recognition is deducted. And that will then give you a total of 15. Now, it becomes a cause for concern. It becomes a cause for concern that mumtahinin are taking imtihan in class 7, class 8, and they are giving 9 and 7 and 8 out of 15. If I'm giving 9 out of 15 in class 7 for recognition of huruf, which means a child in class 7 is failing to recognize 12 letters of the Arabic alphabet. And that is a serious concern. And that is why I'm saying, let us be fair in doing the assessment also. Let us not do it for the sake of doing it. If it is read correctly, we cannot penalize the child. Yes, if it is read incorrectly, then we will immediately penalize the child. And again, I'm not saying, I'm using the word penalize, but not as a punitive measure, but more as a corrective measure. More as a corrective measure. So that is as far as recognition of huruf is concerned. Then we go to the recognition of harakat. Now, in the recognition of harakat, we've made a very slight change. We've made the recognition of harakat in grade 3 to 5, as well as grade 6 to 12 out of 6. So your recognition of harakat, I'm not talking of sukun and tajdeed, I'm only talking of your harakat. And your harakat comprises of your fatha, kasra, dhamma, and your tanween, fathatain, kasratain, dhammatain, 1 mark each. 1 mark each. We've removed the muqaddarat from harakat. And when we come to open letters, I will explain that. You see, we've always understood it to be recognition, muqaddarat to be a recognition issue. And hence we put it in recognition. But now with the passing of time, we would like to believe that that recognition is now sorted out and we can move it to its correct place, which is actually an open letter, and I will discuss it in detail when we come to the open letters. So when we come to the recognition of harakat, put a line if it is a fatha and put on top of it a fatha. Put another line if it is a kasra, below that line put a kasra. Or put a line on top of it, put a dhamma, and same with the tanween. So the ustad is able to, don't just put a stroke there. The ustad won't know if it's kasra or fatha. The ustad won't know if it is kasra or fatha. Won't know if it's kasratain or fathatain. Put a line, and on top, we can put the fatha, in the bottom, the kasra. So the ustad exactly knows what the error was that the learner had made. Generally, in harakat, we shouldn't be getting so many mistakes. If we are, then obviously it is an area, learners do make mistakes, but it's an area for concern that especially if it is done in the higher grades. So it is 1 mark per letter. Then we come to sukoon and tajdeed in recognition. That we have maintained at 3 marks for sukoon, 3 marks for tajdeed, which will also be 6 marks. That's how you get 27 marks for recognition. And it is, again, very important for us to listen very attentively as far as sukoon and tashdid is concerned, and make sure that it is read correctly, that the joining of the letter, if it is a sukoon, how you must join, if it is a tashdid, how it must be joined, that it is done correctly, and give that correct feedback to the ustad. And if we are doing it in our monthly assessments in the classroom, then it is a cue for us of how to do our lesson preparation and how to make sure that before the next monthly assessment, it is corrected and that mistake is not being made by any learner. So recognition will now give you 27 marks, 15 for the huruf, and like I explained, in its different formations, in its different beginning, middle, end. And 6 for your harakat, which is your fatha, kasra, dhamma, and 6 for your sukoon and your tashdid, which is 3 marks each. Then we come to the next slide, which is your special letters. The next slide, which is your special letters. Now, your special letters are those letters which generally, from our observation, learners have difficulty in pronouncing. The other letters, the balance of the letters, the other 19 or 20 letters, generally, there is an example in English. They are using it in English. They pronounce it like that in English. Hence, it's easy to pronounce in the Arabic language. Remember, take them from the known to the unknown. Remember that. But there are these few letters here, which we call special letters, and some makatib, they call it danger letters, because you need to beware. You need to beware. One is, I want to repeat what I said at the beginning, for the benefit of those who were not there at the beginning. We cannot assess a learner in a manner in which we did not teach that learner. Hence, we are saying teach, teach, teach. We need to teach. Even if I am teaching class 5, class 6, class 7, class 10, class 12, revision of part 1 and part 2 should be mandatory. Revision of part 1 and part 2 from time to time should be mandatory, where these concepts are taught. Special letters, open letters, closed letters, etc. So if you look at special letters, we've made a slight change. Again, we listened to you. In grade 6 to 12, we dropped special letters from 30 marks to 20 marks. And we made it 2 marks per special letter. We've maintained the 30 marks in grade 3 to 5. Grade 3 to 5, we've maintained the 30 marks, 3 marks per letter. But in 6 to 12, we have dropped it to 2 marks per letter and made it out of 20 marks. Again, the important aspect that we are stressing and emphasizing on is document the mistake. I can't put a dot. In special letters, I put 3, 4 dots, which means 2 times 4, 8. 3 times 4, 12, depending on which grade it is. How is the ustad going to know which letters the learners must pronounce or pronounce incorrectly? So that is why this assessment sheet has been made very objective. Quran testing is subjective. I'll repeat that. Quran testing is subjective. Allah give jazai khair to our seniors who developed and came up with this assessment sheet that made Quran testing objective. So it gives us an idea. You see why we are saying this. Document the mistake. Tomorrow, if a parent comes, and I'm sure we all have these problems. Just last week, we received a phone call from a parent that the child is being unfairly treated. But if a parent comes and say, how come my child got 85 in Quran? Last year, the Maulana was giving 95. How come this year my child got 85? If I take out this assessment sheet, I'll be able to show the parent that here, when I did the assessment or when the assessment was done externally, this is the mistakes your child made. So it's a cover for me also as the ustad in the classroom, and it is a cover for the ustad of whose class imtihan I'm taking also. So it is important. We are saying this for years. We've been saying it for years. Write down the mistake as the mistake was made. Same with special letters. Write down the mistake as the mistake is made. When they are not pronouncing a letter correctly, it must be documented. And again, not as a punitive measure, but as a corrective measure. So we know we must teach this to the child so that they read it correctly. The objective, again, is so that learners can recite Quran correctly. When they leave us reciting Quran correctly. We move to the next slide. The next slide is your open letters. The next slide is your open letters. Now, like I said, in the open letters, we've included the muqaddarat in open letters. Why? Because your fatha muqaddara is the same in place of alif preceded by a fatha. Your kasra muqaddara is the same as ya sakin preceded by a kasra. And your dhamma muqaddara is the same as waw sakin preceded by a dhamma. Hence, we brought it into the open letter category. But we've maintained the mark, 10 marks. 1 mark is free, 3 marks per mistake. So if a child made a mistake in fatha muqaddara, and the same child makes a mistake in alif preceded by a fatha, we will not deduct the mark twice. If we've deducted it in fatha muqaddara, we will not deduct the mark in alif preceded by a fatha, because fatha muqaddara is qaim muqam. It is in place of that alif preceded by a fatha. So it's the same mistake. We cannot duplicate and we cannot penalize the child twice for one mistake. Like we say, we only penalize the child once. We only deduct the mark once. Same go with your waw sakin preceded by a dhamma. If a child made a mistake in waw sakin preceded by a dhamma, then we deduct the mark. But if the same child makes a mistake in dhamma muqaddara, then we will not deduct the mark there, because we've already deducted the mark in waw sakin preceded by a dhamma. And same goes with ya sakin preceded by kasra. So this will remain as 3 marks per mistake. So if the mistake is made in dhamma muqaddara, write down dhamma muqaddara. If it is made in ya sakin preceded by a kasra, put a ya sakin and put a kasra behind it. So I, as the ustad in the classroom, knows that this is the open letter that they had difficulty with, or this particular learner had difficulty with. And as the ustad in the classroom, I then am able to understand how I must pitch my lesson and how I must teach my lesson, inshallah. If we move over to the closed letters, there also we have maintained the mark of 10 marks. Your closed letters is basically your fatha, kasra, dhamma, the dragging. Again, there are a few aspects that needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to closed letters. There's a new trend that we have been picking up in the last few imtihans, where learners are beginning to drag in the beginning of the word, they are beginning to drag in the middle of the word, and they are dragging at the end of the word. So it must be documented as such. So if the dragging is on fatha, I know the column is small, so I will put a fatha. They're dragging on the fatha, I will put a fatha. But I have some space in the bottom. If that space in the bottom also is not sufficient, turn the page around and put a footnote. So the ustad knows they must turn around and explain to the ustad that the child was dragging in the middle of the word or at the beginning of the word. Instead of reading A'u, they read A'u. So they dragged on the right at the beginning. Instead of reading A'udhu, A'udhu, they read A'udhu billahi. So accordingly, we write down that closed letter so the ustad know that this dragging is happening on this letter. And if we have to put a footnote on the assessment sheet, turn the assessment sheet around, put a footnote on the side, find the space, put a footnote so the ustad understands how the dragging was made, where the dragging was made, and that can then be rectified and then can be corrected. So this is all very important to take into consideration. There are some examples on the on your screen there that to teach the learner, show them how to read the last letter of one word and the first letter of the next word must be read together. This is for simple explanation. That not a'udhu billah, but a'udhu billah. Zubillah. But obviously there shouldn't be emphasis. I'm just putting that emphasis. There shouldn't be that emphasis on zubillah. No. But a'udhu billah. That's how they should read it. together. So there's no dragging taking place between the last letter of the first word and the first letter of the second word. And if it is being made in the middle of the word, then we need to highlight that and teach that accordingly to our learners. If we move to the next slide, which is on fluency. Now, very recently, fluency, we have given 10 marks. Initially, our fluency and stops together was 10 marks. Now we have separated the fluency and stops. We have made fluency 10 marks, and in grade 3 to 5, the stops are 3 marks, and in grade 6 to 12, the stops are 6 marks. So in grade 3 to 5, stops are 1 mark each, and in grade 3 to 5, it's 2 marks each. So fluency is 10 marks. How do we ascertain fluency? What criteria should we use to ascertain whether a child is reading fluently or not? Very boldly on your screen, you can see fast reading is not fluency. Fast reading is not fluency. What is fluency? There should be flow in reading, no breaking of words. And at the same time, while there is a flow in reading and no breaking of words, application of all Quranic concepts are applied correctly while reading. That is fluency, not fast reading as such. So, in fact, we shouldn't be encouraging fast reading. We need to encourage reading at a good pace, at what we would call in Darul Ulum when we learned Hadar, probably at that pace that they should be reading Quran, and not very fast reading. Not very, very fast reading, because fast reading is not fluency. Fluency is these 3 points that you see here in front of you. There may be more. And we do not have a problem for anybody suggesting what other criteria could be included to use to ascertain how to give a mark for fluency. But in our understanding, fluency is there's a flow in reading, there's no breaking of words, and application of all concepts. Application of all concepts while reading is being correctly applied with a flow and no breaking of words. Then you will know that child is reading fluency. But if they are breaking up, there's no flow, and they are reading fast, they have a flow, they're not breaking, but they're not applying the concepts. Makharij is not being applied, the open letters are not being applied, rules of tajweed are not being applied, then we know that there should be some mark deducted from the fluency to show to the ustad that this is while the child is reading fast, but the child is not fluent in the sense that the concepts are not being applied. So that is as far as fluency is concerned. If you go to your stops, in your stops, there are 3 stops. One is your harakat, fatha, kasra, dhamma. When stopping on the harakat, you need to stop at it, make it a sukoon. The harakat start changes to a sukoon. One is your fathatain, which changes to alif preceded by a fatha, and one is your ta marbuta. Your round ta, which changes to a ha. So in grade 3 to 5, 1 mark each, and in grade 6 to 12, 2 marks each to deduct as far as stops are concerned. Now we are not talking here of stops of waqf in what we would learn in Darul Ulum, Ma'rifatul Wuquf, or whatever it may be. We're not talking of those kind. We are talking of the basic waqf here, because that is what we are teaching them. To make basic waqf, they need to know where to stop and how to stop. Where to stop and how to stop. If they are stopping, how must they stop? If they're stopping on a haraka, how you stop on a haraka? If you're stopping on a round ta, how you stop on a round ta? And accordingly, we write down that, okay, I deducted 2 marks in grade 6 for stops because of a round ta that was not read as a ha. It was read as a, it was still read as a round ta. It was not read as a ha. So accordingly, the ustad will know that this is the stop mistake that the learner made. And if we go on to the last column, which is tajweed. Now in tajweed, we have maintained the 5 marks for grade 3 to 5. Overall application is taken into consideration, but what we have done, and when we show you the assessment sheet at the end, what we have done, we have put a footnote on the top of the assessment sheet. Normally the footnotes comes on the side and the bottom. We put one on the top, right? There's 5 concepts that by grade 3, as far as Tajweed is concerned, they should know 5 concepts because they already did it in part 1 and part 2. Those 5 concepts are Ghunna, laws of the letter Lam, that is the word Allah, laws of the letter Ra, your mad muttasil and your mad munfasil, your small mad and your big mad. They should know it because they've already done it in part 1 and part 2. So by grade 3, 4, 5, we're already getting them into the groove of applying those laws of Tajweed. We are not saying don't teach the other laws of Tajweed in grade 3, 4, 5. No, teach it there. But we have just asked for these to be concentrated upon in grade 3 to 5. When you go to grade 6 to 12, we've made Tajweed out of 12 marks. And I think I must say this. As Talimi board, Jamia Talimi board, every supervisor has this desire, has this cry, when is that day going to come when Tajweed, rules of Nun Sakin, Mim Sakin, letter Lam, Ra, etc., that column will be out of 50 marks. And the rest of the concepts will be out of 50 marks. When is that day going to come? And inshallah, that day will come. And we have belief and conviction that if every muallim and muallima objectively utilizes this assessment sheet that has been developed, then inshallah, we will reach that objective very quickly. But the key is consistency. And I think I should have mentioned this much earlier. From ta'awudh and tasmiyah, the key is consistency. Don't ever allow a child to recite incorrectly. With love, with mahabbat, with compassion, without using words, my darling, my sweetheart, my dikro. No, don't use those words. You can get in trouble. But very compassionately, lovingly, in a beautiful way, explain to the child what they're reading incorrectly and how it should be read correctly with consistency. That is very, very important to have consistency in teaching. So when it comes to Tajweed, we have made for grade 3 to 5 concepts that you will concentrate on when deducting marks, and we've put those 5 concepts onto the assessment sheet. It's not on the ones that we sent out, but inshallah by Monday we will send out the ones that has those concepts. If you have already printed the assessment sheet, because I know I'm going to get a phone call tomorrow that we already printed the assessment sheets for the whole year, no problem. Just take this one, you can blow it up into an A3 or A2 and put it in your classroom so everybody can see it. And the Mumtahin will also be able to see it when he goes to the classroom. And in grade 6 to 12, we have taken the 12 concepts of Tajweed. 4 of Nun Sakin, Idhar, Ikhfa, Idgham, which is your Ghunna, and Qalb. 3 of Mim Sakin, your Idhar, Ikhfa, and Idgham. Your rules of the letter, word Allah, letter Lam. Rules of the letter Ra, your Madda Muttasil and your Madda Munfasil. That also we have included on the assessment sheet so you can see the concept. So what we would suggest that when it comes to the Tajweed column, now we know it's a small column, right? We know it's a small column. It's a catch-22. I saw someone comment here also saying that we should add columns and make columns bigger. Alhamdulillah, we appreciate those comments, but we're in a catch-22 situation. We make the columns bigger, then we get a complaint that there's too much photocopying that needs to be done. We're using too much of paper. We make the columns smaller, there's a space to write. That's why I said, if we have to write more, make a footnote, write it at the back of the assessment sheet, write it on the side, write it in the bottom, that at least it is written there, the Ustad is able to see. But for Tajweed, we have put numbers there. All you have to do is just put a number in the Tajweed column, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. You can put that in the Tajweed column. For the grade 6 to 12, we've also left it as 1 to 5, but it's broken down. Number 1 is your rules of Nun Sakin. So you can just put 1 IK, ID, whatever it is, just to make the Ustad understand that it is Idgham, Ikhfa, Izhar, or Qalb, whatever it may be. But somehow we give them indication that here, This is the mistake that has been made in Tajweed. So this is basically the assessment sheet as far as Quran is concerned, grade 3 to 5, grade 6 to 12. I know many people may have some questions. We appreciate those questions. Time is not on our side because we still need to go through surahs and du'as. But your circuit supervisor is there. I'm sure everybody has the circuit supervisor's number. Go to your principal, go to your HOD, share your ideas and your concerns that he can contact the circuit supervisor, and inshallah we will take it from there and see how best. This is now work in progress, and we will see how best we can accommodate all the suggestions that do come. We don't promise, but we will see how best we can do that, inshallah. So very quickly, if you go to the assessment sheet itself, we're going to put up the assessment sheet now on your screens. If you see the Quran assessment sheet, grade 3 to 5, there has been a change made to this particular one that you see. It's just that the change was made late today. Hence, I don't know if we managed to get it onto the screen here. So in this, here on the top where you see name, we have put down the Tajweed concepts there. Everything else is already on the assessment sheet. The mark and how the criteria for deducting the mark. Everything else is there. Even when it comes to stops, we have put it here, it is left blank, but we have added it in there to say that in stops, this is how many marks must be deducted for the stops. If you go to the next assessment sheet, the one for grade 6 to 12, I'm just waiting for that one to come up on the screen. You can see again, everything in this column where you see name, there we have put the Tajweed concepts. Because when we sent out this particular form, and I'm saying this in jest, I'm saying it as a joke, some ulama phoned us and said, you got the 12 marks for Tajweed, but now we're going to know 1 mark per concept. Now, I thought to myself that ulama are supposed to know the concepts of Tajweed, but nevertheless, we'll give it to you. So we added it on there. And as you can see in the stops, here we've added on 2 marks per mistake. So we can see how the criteria for deducting of marks must be done. What I want to say, very important. Many a time we come to an institute, whether it's a school or a maktab, you see the top section where you say madrasa or school, town, class, muallim, muallima, date is not filled in. Now that is unfair to the mumtahin. I know of mumtahinin who walked out of the classroom till that was filled in. Really. I know of such mumtahinin, not from the supervisors. Alhamdulillah, supervisors won't do that. But I know of mumtahin, they walked out of the classroom till that section is not filled in. We have to fill in that top section. In all the assessment sheets. In the Quran one, the surahs one, the adiyah one. As well as all information on the mumtahins or moderators report must be filled in by the class teacher, not by the mumtahin. It must be filled in by the class teacher, not by the mumtahin. HODs, please take note of this. HODs and principals, please take note of this and make sure that it is done, that all the information that needs to be filled in by the class teacher must be filled in on all 3 assessment sheets, including the mumtahin or the moderators report. If you go to the next assessment sheet, which is your surah assessment sheet, you will see what the changes that we have made there are. We have made your memorization remain 60, right? If you look on the top, the mumtahin must test at least 3 surahs. We have included there, and we have done a breakdown of groupings of the surahs. Now, obviously, it will be grade appropriate, but generally, from grade 5 right up to matric, Wadduha to Surah to Nas is being tested, right? So we've put a grouping of surahs that from each group, you will test 1 surah, and that is how you will get your 3 surahs tested. And we've put the surah 1, surah 2, surah 3. If possible, we should write which surah every learner was tested. Which surah every learner was tested. So it's important that surah 1, what did I test Ismail? Surah 2, what did I test Sumayya? Surah 3, what did I test Abdul Rahman? So it must be written down so that the ustad knows that this is the surah that was made. And in that, on the top, we can just put a note of how many mistakes were made. And at the back, we can even put what mistakes were made. But if you see, we have added a column for common errors, but there's no mark allocated for common errors, because common error is a mistake. If a child read, for example, ma law instead of ma lahu, read ma law instead of ma lahu, it's a mistake. So it's going to be marked off as a mistake, but highlighted because it is a common error. The famous common error is yaqeen and yaqeen of Surah Takathur. And قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ those are common errors that are being made that needs to be rectified. So as much as the child knows the surah, but because of these common errors, is making a mistake in that surah. So it is marked off as a mistake, but we've put a dedicated column for common errors. So all the common errors can be highlighted. Inshallah, there is a document that we have prepared of common errors, and we will try to share it with you so you can see that even in your teaching, we try to include most of the common errors that we are aware of, but if there are any others, you can even let us know. Then at least when you are teaching, when listening to surahs and du'as, how to listen to surahs. See, surahs and du'as is not all about memorization. Sometimes surahs and du'as, we only concentrate on memorization. So if the child knows it, is able to read the surah and the dua, alhamdulillah, we feel happy that they memorized the surah correctly. But did they recite it correctly? They probably memorized it and be able to read it from memory, but they are not reciting it correctly. Hence, pronunciation, marks are deducted for pronunciation. Tajweed, marks are deducted for tajweed. So when doing surahs and Quran in our classroom, we need to keep this assessment rubric in front of us, that this is how the child is going to be assessed. I repeat, a child, it's not fair to assess a child in a manner in which the child was not tested. So that is as far as surahs and surahs are concerned. When you go to the dua assessment sheet, if Maulana Maulvi, can you just put up the dua assessment sheet, please? Maulana Maulvi, can you just put up the dua assessment sheet? While we are waiting, I will just explain the dua assessment sheet. Inshallah, it will come up on your screen now. Again, you will see there. We have put there that the mumtahin must test at least 3 adiyah. But we've added a suggestion, footnote, 1 kalima, 1 salah dua, and a grade appropriate other basic dua must be tested. A grade appropriate other basic dua must be tested, because kalimas and salah duas are very important. They have to know it, whether it's in grade 3 already at the end of the year, they're supposed to know their salah duas. In grade 4, 5, 6 upwards, they're supposed to know their salah duas. But still we are finding learners making errors in salah duas or making common errors in salah duas. Nakhla'u and naghla'u, whatever it may be, but concentrate. We've put that column for common errors also, and we have added this dua 1, dua 2, dua 3. So write the dua that was tested. It is very, very beneficial. What is important, I'm seeing a lot of comments here of how to fill in the assessment sheet. One is assessment sheet, as I mentioned, that call whatever is given there on the top, madrasa, school, muallim, muallima, class date, that must be filled in. And the names of the learners must also be filled in. The names of the learners must also be filled in. In the bottom where it says Mumtahin remarks, telephone signature, that's not for you. That's for the Mumtahin to fill in. That the Mumtahin will come and fill in. When it comes to your reports, again, all information must be filled in. And when filling in the report, there must be correlation between the marks in the assessment sheet and the symbol that you are giving in the report. I cannot give 5 out of 5 to 24 out of 25 learners in the classroom for ta'awudh and tasmiyah, and yet I give B or C for ta'awudh and tasmiyah. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make sense. Yes, there needs to be correlation. If children are getting 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5, or most of the class is getting 3 out of 5, then they are making, each child is making 2 mistakes, or most of them are making 2 mistakes, then I can give a B or a C depending on how many children are in the classroom. But if I'm giving 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, I can't give a B or C if most of the class got 4 or 5 out of 5. So take that into consideration, that there must be correlation between the assessment, the mark that we put in the column, and the symbol that you are giving in the Mumtahin's report. And same goes with the moderator's report. If I'm giving 27, 24 out of 30 in grade 3 to 5 for special letters, I can't give a C symbol for all learners. Yes, if they are mixed, most of the learners got 18 out of 30, or they got 15 out of 30, most of the learners, then I can put a symbol C or D, depending. So we're not asking you to use a calculator, but to use your discretion and see that there must be some sort of correlation between the mark that was given to the entire class, not only the report is not for weak learners, or no, it's not only for those learners that excel. It's for the whole class. So we need to give a holistic report on the performance of the entire class and not selected learners. Understand that. The Mumtahin and the moderator's report is not on selected learners. Many a time when we get a report, the report is given because of 2 weak learners in the classroom. So everybody, the report C is given because there's 2 weak learners out of 20 learners. It's not fair on the ustad and it is not fair on the class. So there needs to be some sort of correlation. Not needs to be, there should be some correlation between the mark that we give in each of these columns, whether it is in surahs, whether it is in adiyah, whether it is in Quran. Accordingly, we put in the symbol or we put the excellent, good, needs attention, etc. in the moderator's report. So that is basically the assessment sheets that we have developed, the changes that we have made, and we're hoping that inshallah the second term had started already. Our imtihan will start on the 11th of June. Sorry, on the 11th of May. Rosters have already been sent out. Every institute has already received their rosters for the imtihan. Accordingly, we need to start preparing. For those that are going to have the imtihan in the beginning of May, from the 11th of May onwards, by then already you should have done one assessment in your classroom. If possible, principals and HODs, please take note. If possible, that assessment that was done in the first term, 2 assessments that was probably done in the first term, and the one assessment that was done in the second term, or 2 for those that are going to be having the imtihan in June, try to put it in the folder. Try to put it in the folder so we can see that the assessment was done, but not to intimidate the mumtahin. Again, I'm going to repeat that. Not to intimidate the mumtahin. Again, and forgive me for saying this, what we find is the class teacher is giving excellent marks, brilliant marks. But when the mumtahin walks in, those marks are not justified. This is amanat. It is amanat. If a child is deserving of 30 and I give 30, alhamdulillah. But if the child is not deserving of 30 and I'm giving 30, then inna lillah. Because I have made breach of trust in my teaching. If a child is not deserving of a mark, we cannot give the mark they don't deserve. We need to be fair and honest. Again, why that mark? That mark is for corrective measures. It's not for punishing. It is not to punish the child. So the child knows I need to, buck up. I need to, like the elders used to say, pull up my socks. I need to catch a wake up. So that is very important. So this is very briefly, inshallah, we're going to conclude now. Apologies that we have taken 5 minutes extra. We'll conclude now with the dua. But any questions that anybody have, any suggestions that anybody have, if you just go back on the screen, Maulana, you can just go back where we got the email address and leave it there for a while. Please contact us via the email, or first prize and first option is contact your circuit supervisor, and inshallah we will see how best we can assist you. I will now ask Maulana Shafiq, inshallah, to conclude with a dua. And jazakallah once again for one and all who have joined and taken a benefit, hopefully, from this particular workshop, and hopefully we will be able to implement it in our classrooms. Wa akhiru dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Maulana Shafiq will now make the dua for us and we will close the meeting. Jazakallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wal aqibatu lil muttaqin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursalin. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Radina billahi rabban wa bil islami dina. Wa bi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam nabiyya. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك وإنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت فلك الحمد على ما قضيت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك اللهم اغفر لنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات وألف بين قلوبهم وأصلح ذات بينهم وانصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم اللهم لعن الكفرة الذين يصدون عن سبيلك ويكذبون رسلك ويقاتلون أولياءك اللهم خالف بين كلمتهم وزلزل أقدامهم وأنزل بهم بأسك الذي لا ترد عن القوم المجرمين رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل نعم المولى ونعم النصير إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Just one more point I'd like to add before we conclude, inshallah. It's very important for us to have a progress sheet for each learner in our classroom, especially for surahs and du'as. And that will give us an indication of how the learner is actually progressing as far as the surahs and du'as. And we use it in conjunction with the assessment sheet that we have. Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq and Allah reward us. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.